Hello there, welcome to the channel. This is Nerd.World. In today's video we are looking at the Jem'Hadar as part of our Warrior Races series. If you're new to this channel, I have a full playlist of the different warrior races from different science fiction franchises, including the Jafar from Stargate SG-1, there's the Sontaran from Doctor Who, and many others. There'll be a link, maybe, if I remember. Maybe, if I remember. If not, go onto my channel and find the playlist. It's there. Trust me. I have two other channels as a side note, a shameless self-promotion. Nerd.World Films, it's very similar to this channel, that explores all things to do with movies, and Nerd.World History, that explores historical events and figures that take my interest. With that said, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below if you think this video is worthy. And with that said, let's get started on the lore of the Jem'Hadar, the stormtroopers of the Dominion. The Jem'Hadar, in some ways, are perhaps the first victims of the Dominion, as some old imperial powers citizens would phrase it. Sometimes people forget the first victim of a dictatorship are its own citizens. The Jem'Hadar are a genetically engineered humanoid species that originate in the Gamma Quadrant. They're physically tough, semi-reptilian in appearance, although they do have some mammalian features like hair. They are very strong and have a natural ability to, as they put it, shroud, which is similar to a sort of biological cloaking device. This, combined with extensive training and highly evolved instincts, makes them near undetectable in the battlefield. Their ability to shroud confuses certain types of sensors that are not properly calibrated to detect them, and they are trained to slow their breathing. They move quietly, they don't make noise, they won't speak. They're very good at it. But to do this does require an infusion of a chemical enzyme known as ketracel white, which their bodies are chemically dependent on. The white is also a sort of vitamin soup that provides everything their body requires, including the ability to help them heal faster, maintain focus, and also do things like give them sort of a heightened sense of confidence and strength in themselves. The white is, however, an addictive narcotic as well, which is where a lot of those sort of self-confidence and strength that gives you come from. Some Jem'Hadar have been known to naturally be able to produce the white, meaning that it may be something their species was originally capable of producing, but the founders, the creators of the Dominion, the changelings, removed it from their chromosome structure, meaning that their species have to be intravenously fed it. It is also fed into them via a very exposed tube on their neck that the Jem'Hadar is forced to protect. This is an exposure, a weakness, a very deliberate one, clearly placed by the changelings to make remind the Jem'Hadar where they are and whose they are. It is said, or at least rumoured, that originally the Jem'Hadar were a natural species, a race of warriors perhaps not too unlike the Klingons, who were approached by the Dominion and offered the chance to become the greatest warriors in the galaxy, and they accepted, although this history may be completely fictitious and just a Jem'Hadar story or legend. If it is true, then the Jem'Hadar gave up a great deal. There, for example, are no female Jem'Hadar. There are only male warrior Jem'Hadar, and Jem'Hadar don't really do anything else. They are nothing but soldiers. They're not engineers or technicians, although they do have some basic working knowledge of technology. You don't get a Jem'Hadar doctor or a Jem'Hadar scientist. They are a soldier. They're bred for war, literally. They have accelerated aging. They mature within days and are fighting ready once fully mature. They will instinctively want to continuously fight with perceived enemies. They instinctually, upon even seeing a changeling, when even not knowing what it is, will serve it and wish to be near it, because to them, the changelings, the founders, are gods. And as a result, they fight with the fanaticism of any soldier who believes that he's fighting for his god. The Jem'Hadar, as a result, have been known for extreme brutality and fanaticism against the enemies of the Dominion, using suicide tactics quite readily, often stating that if they can't be sure, for example, that a mission is successful or if an explosive device that they have planted will go off, then they stay to make sure that it goes off blowing themselves up along with it. They'll ram their ship into an enemy vessel as a main battle tactic rather than just use the weapons and normal conventional warfare tactics. The Jem'Hadar are known to not take prisoners. They're extremely vicious and they expect no quarter from their enemy. They are, however, relatively honourable, with a basic code of behaviour and conduct that keeps them somewhat stable and controlled in battle. But a Klingon would put it that the Jem'Hadar don't have honour. At least it's not a form of honour the Klingons necessarily recognise. The Jem'Hadar are brothers at arms, but they're not comrades in the same way Klingons are or humans are. They accept death as an everyday occurrence and will sacrifice themselves or other members of their squad quite easily, without any second thought of it, and they'll never think of them again. To the Jem'Hadar as well, living to the age of 20 is considered a long life. The average Jem'Hadar only living a few years. This is due to their accelerated aging, but also because of their extremely violent lifestyle. The Jem'Hadar the Dominion is always at war with someone, so therefore the Jem'Hadar are in a constant state of war and conflict, and rarely make it past 2 decades. And they are considered honoured elders if they do. Aboard their ships, or aboard other Dominion installations and amongst Jem'Hadar ground units, there is a first. Very, very simple ranking system. First, second, third, fourth, etc. The Jem'Hadar have a very, very basic numerical ranking system, as well as then just a general stock infantry at the base of that. Is how they organize themselves and keep themselves stable. They do have ambition to rise up the ranks. To become first, especially if you're aboard a starship, gives you the honor of being able to actually view the battlefield, not just command the troops, but command other ships perhaps. You're in charge when the Vorta is not around. You have the headset that allows you to have a heads-up display that allows you to see what's happening beyond the vessel using the ship's sensors, as Dominion vessels don't have view screens to allow the crew in general to see what's happening. The vessels are also deliberately austere and Spartan, and extremely simplistic in appearance. This is because no frills. The Dominion doesn't put anything aboard its ships it doesn't need, except for an excessively large number of Jem'Hadar. A Jem'Hadar attack ship has an unusually large crew for such a small vessel, having on average 41 Jafar and 1 Vorta per attack ship, which was a vessel that's smaller than a Defiant class warship that has a crew about 10 smaller. A lot of the time can be run with a much smaller crew. This is because a lot of the Jem'Hadar are soldiers there for boarding missions or for beaming down to planets or whatever. The vessels also don't have a sick bay. They have limited cargo capacity, no dedicated transporter room, no holodecks. They don't even have replicators. Although the Vorta do consume food, they will likely just sustain a small amount of synthesized food perhaps, or stores of very, very basic foodstuffs for the Vorta to eat. Whereas the Jem'Hadar derive no nutrition. Everything they need is provided by the Ketracel White. And they are willing at the drop of a hat or the instruction of the Vorta, who they see as the sort of living mouthpieces of the Dominion, of the founders, their gods. Although the Vorta are also servants, the Jem'Hadar are somewhat third tier in the Dominion, and the Vorta are second tier. Even amongst servants, someone has to be in charge, as Gul Dukat would once phrase it. The Vorta are in charge of handing out the Ketracel Whites, and are the only person aboard the ship that has access to it. Even the Jem'Hadar first is not granted that honor. Although he can give out the white, it has to be first given to him by the Vorta, who is there to maintain order and discipline and make sure that the Jem'Hadar are towing the party line. Although it is more likely that in a tactical situation, command would more likely fall to the Jem'Hadar first rather than the Vorta. As Vorta can be quite cowardly, it might be less willing to give the order to suicidally crash into the deflector dish of a Galaxy-class starship, for example. As a result of this, the Jem'Hadar make fearsome opponents in the battlefield. They are infamous and legendary for their discipline, their self-control, their savagery, their brutality, and their absolute zero mercy and zero fucks given, quite frankly, towards any enemy of the Dominion. They are told to kill you, they will kill you. If they're told to work with you, they'll work with you. If you're a member of the Dominion, you still don't want the Jem'Hadar turning up. The Vorta tell you to do something. If you don't do it, they send in the Jem'Hadar. When they send in the Jem'Hadar probably kill you and your family, and then keep killing your people until someone agrees to do what the Vorta said. no one crosses the Jem'Hadar. They are definitely one of the Star Trek universe's most ferocious combatants, one of the greatest enemies the Federation ever faced. Although not the real power behind the Dominion, in some ways, as I said, victims of it themselves, as they are effectively a race of slaves with no ability for self-determination or anything of their own, and any Jem'Hadar that step out of line are killed instantly. A few Jem'Hadar in the past have gone rogue or tried to gain their independence from the Dominion, all of which have failed due to the overarching sheer weight of power of the Dominion. But they are a formidable opponent, able to take on every Alpha Quadrant power with ease, with even an Alpha Quadrant genetically engineered variant with genetically programmed information about Alpha Quadrant races rather than Gamma Quadrant, supposedly to give them an edge when dealing with Alpha Quadrant races. These Jem'Hadar will be trained as well as bred with knowledge of Klingons, Romulans and humans and Ferengi, Cardassians, etc. A better knowledge of them, their anatomy, their tactics and their species, in order to better defeat them in battle for the glory of the Founders and the Dominion. And to the Jem'Hadar, that's all they need. That assurance that they're doing their gods' work, that their gods want them to do this, so they will do it unquestioningly. Any Jem'Hadar that dares to question it again will simply be killed. And another one bred to take its place. The Dominion could breed a Jem'Hadar faster than the combined forces of the Federation, Romulans, and the Klingons could kill them. This is a species that's in a way almost not a species. Whether they bear any physical or psychological resemblance to the race that they were originally derived from is completely unknown. Whether there are examples of other Gamma Quadrant races having a similar ability to shroud, such as the Tosk, who are also a reptilian-like species. There is possibility that the two are related, but that's more of a hypothesis than any kind of proven theory. So there we have it, the Jem'Hadar of the Dominion, one of the most ferocious and brutal races ever created, literally created. Bit of interesting backstory: most of the races in Star Trek are based on some culture or aspect or idea from our own world. For example, the Klingons, their original creation was to be the antagonists in a sort of outer space Cold War that was meant to be a reflection of the politics of the 1960s, so they were in a way the Soviets. It's one of the reasons that proto-Klingon vessels in Enterprise were given a Soviet-ish style brutalistic architecture to their hull design. It was to make them look more primitive, but also to make them look a little bit more 1950s Soviet, sort of cobbled together. The whole Klingon aesthetic, in a way, in those early days was modelled on that. The Romulans, very famously and quite obviously, are closely modelled on the Roman Empire, with titles like Centurion, Praetor, their eagle as being a standard. Their architecture on their homeworld is very neoclassical, very Romanesque, basically. And etc. The Klingons, in a more modern context, both DS9 onwards and up to Discovery even, are more closely sort of in a culture to maybe Vikings, as they're a sort of loose alliance of different clans and houses and little mini empires all working together to be one big empire under the Greater Klingon High Council and Chancellor. And they have a warrior culture, they believe in Stovako, which is kind of basically Valhalla, etc. They're kind of Viking-like, they're like space Vikings. And the Dominion was somewhat, and I mean very somewhat, it was actually in a way a sort of mirror of the Federation, is what it was meant to be. And the Jem'Hadar were sort of, it was like a dark reflection of what the Federation could have been. It could have been more this dark empire. It was a reflection of what capitalism could be. Instead of being the Soviets, basically they were the NATO nations, but they were gone wrong. They'd gone to more the far right. Whereas, obviously, the older one is the Soviets were the far left. The Jem'Hadar, specifically for their discipline and their training, even the name Jem'Hadar is derived from an old British military unit which in the 19th century existed. The British Army, the Redcoats, the famous British Redcoats, were famed in the 19th century and are still somewhat famous to this day for their discipline and their fearlessness in battle. They would literally march into battle, into oncoming fire, with no fear of death, and seemingly they would never break rank, they would never run, they would never stop. They were like a race of machines marching into battle. And there was one group known as the Jem'Hadar, who were actually Indian auxiliaries in the British Army. And the Jem'Hadar actually derived their name from the Jem'Hadar of the Imperial Reserves of the British Empire in the 19th century. And just with that bit of back trivia, there we have it. The Jem'Hadar of the Dominion. One of the greatest enemies and most powerful empires the Federation ever faced. What do you think of them? What do you like? Do you like the Jem'Hadar? I personally fucking loved the entire Dominion storyline arc of Deep Space Nine. Was amazing, brilliant. Had some of the best villains. Gul Dukat, in fact. Pardon me. I have a video somewhere on playlist which I'll try and again remember to link, which is some of the top villains in Star Trek, and somewhere on that list is Gul Dukat. He was fantastic. One of the best, most rounded and most developed villains Star Trek has ever done. The Jem'Hadar were also a well-established villain for that series, that unlike many others were very fleshed out with, like, it showed different aspects to them. They weren't just cartoonish supervillains, your average space Nazi who just needs to be exterminated. They were shown as faceted and nuanced individuals themselves, as they were fully sentient beings. With that said, like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and bye-bye. I'll see you next time.